Well, the first half, we always talk about how it is you go about making a living, and the second half, we talk about how it is you go about making a life. This is one of those areas that actually, well, goes both ways. We're talking highway to health, and we're talking immunizations. Dr. Uli von Andrian. Is going to be joining us this morning. He is the president of the American Association of Immunologists. I'm thrilled to have him on. Welcome back. It's good to have you. How have you been?
Very good. How are you?
I don't have any complaints. I mean, I'll tell you this. Every time I fly back into Burbank, I get my booster shots, and it kept me in good stead because a lot of folks in my family had a re-upping of COVID over the last couple of weeks. A lot of my friends got flu the last couple of weeks. So we're going to be talking about immunology today. So where would you like to begin?
Well, I would love to answer any questions that you have regarding how vaccines work and why we are considering them so important. And I would also like to address any concerns you might have regarding their safety or the way they protect us. I believe vaccines are among the most significant accomplishments that medical science has made in the past couple hundred years, really. And I would like to sort of stand up for you and your audience to explain why I have that opinion.
By the way, like I said, this is one of those things too, where you go back all the way to Benjamin Franklin and him actually expressing regrets later in his life that he didn't take advantage of this new budding science, this new budding awareness, the new awakening that began to happen. Can you kind of give us an overview history of it to kind of begin with? I mentioned Benjamin Franklin. There are a number of stories of people who actually ended up shaping the future of the country because they literally had an early edition of this kind of stuff slipped under their skin, were able to live a lot longer than people back then usually lived. But can you kind of give us an overview of how it is immunization works and why it is so important?
Yeah, actually, I'd like to go even a little bit further back to the mid 1700s when smallpox were really ravaging human societies all over the world. And a English physician called Edward Jenner observed that women who were taking care of dairy cattle were protected against smallpox. And this is because cows were infected with a very similar bug that humans get. So we get smallpox, cows get cowpox. These are two different viruses, but they're very similar. And if you get infected with cowpox, you don't get very sick, but you have cross immunity against smallpox. So Edward Jenner figured this out, and he made the first vaccine. By the way, vaccine comes from the Latin word vacca, which stands for cow. And so he used the milkmaid who had cowpox and took a little bit of a pustule of where the woman was infected and inoculated that into a little boy, and subsequently challenged that boy with smallpox, and it turned out the boy was protected. And that was really the start of vaccination. So at the time of Jenner, when a baby was born, its life expectancy was less than 40 years. Today, our life expectancy is twice that. And this is mostly because we have learned to protect ourselves against infections. And the single most important way by which we do that is actually through vaccination.
It's interesting too because nowadays when somebody makes a scientific discovery or a scientific breakthrough, it'll end up in a journal, it'll end up on the internet. And by the way, even though the internet has caused problems in regard to the spread of misinformation, we can get the word out. I was kind of curious from a standpoint, how long does it really take? Because I can imagine people were opposed to this early on too. How long did it kind of take for that to spread? Just like the viruses were spreading, just like these diseases were spreading, how soon before people, as we get to the end of the 17th century, at the end of the 18th century, how soon before this becomes common practice in what will become the industrialized Western world?
Yeah, so actually, that is a good question because back in the 1700s, there were also vigorous debates about the safety and the efficacy and the sort of the science behind this vaccination approach, there were people that were, vigorously opposed to this innovation, and others that were believers. But ultimately, basically, you just look at the facts and see that children who were vaccinated survived, and children who weren't vaccinated often got very ill, and many of them unfortunately died. So in a way, over the years, humanity came to realize that vaccines work, and so that's how they became common practice. And in a way, we have become a little bit sort of victims of the success of vaccines, because many of the very severe diseases that vaccines prevent have become extremely rare. So most of us have never seen a child with measles, for example, or with polio, simply because almost everybody so far has been vaccinated, and so the condition itself has become almost eradicated. But if we drop our guard and stop vaccinating our children, then those diseases unfortunately can make a comeback, and we're already seeing that for measles in some areas of the country now.
Dr. Uli von Andrian joins us this morning here. He is the president of American Association of Immunologists. To kind of put things in perspective, when I was growing up, there were actually two of my teachers, one of whom was a nun, the other of whom was an older gentleman. The older gentleman had a brace on his right leg, and the nun actually had two arm braces that she had to kind of walk herself down. They both have been survivors, but victims of polio. And I don't think a lot of people, well, hardly anybody remembers this now, but when the vaccination for polio was discovered, President Eisenhower actually ordered bells rung out all over the United States because, this was a thing that many people thought, would never be kind of solved or cured, would never go away. And when it happens, we end up getting the great gift where he wouldn't even patent it. He basically gives it away, correct? I mean, people don't understand. A lot of the things that are now immunizable were death sentences when they first, before the immunizations came out, correct?
That's exactly right. I think that's a very good point to make. You can think of vaccines similar to a seatbelt, right? We wear seatbelts when we drive a car or a truck because we know there's a risk that we get into an accident. And if we do get into an accident, a seatbelt can save our lives. We don't need it as long as there is no accident, but if we don't have it when there is one, we are in trouble. Similarly to vaccines, we are hedging against the risk of running into a pathogen that can make us potentially very ill or even kill us, or render us, paralyzed for life, or with severe brain damage, like in the case of measles. And the vaccine is basically that sort of biological seatbelt that allows us to, prevent that risk from becoming a reality.
Can you talk a little about it? There's a term that a lot of people hear but don't understand, and Malcolm Gladwell actually uses it metaphorically in his book, The Tipping Point. Can you talk a little bit about herd immunity and the idea that things could go one of two ways? Either you get a virus or a disease spreading like wildfire, or you actually vaccinate enough people where you actually develop a firewall of sorts that protects everybody. But can you talk about herd immunity a little bit?
Yeah. So all of the pathogens, viruses, or bacteria against we vaccinate rely on their ability to spread from one person to the other. And so if they can do this, like say in the case of COVID not so long ago, but in case of flu every year, then one person infects two infect four infect eight, and so forth. And over short term, you end up with a epidemic or even a pandemic. But if 2 out of 3 people that we encounter actually have existing immunity that prevent the virus to take a foothold, then the virus has a much harder time to spread. And in fact, as the natural immune system in a person who's infected with such a virus kicks in and eliminates that virus eventually, then that virus has lost its chance to spread across the population and basically fizzles out. So the percentage of individuals who are vaccinated, who cannot be infected when exposed to a virus, indirectly also protects all the people who are not vaccinated or who have a weakened immune system so that they cannot properly respond to a vaccine. But so there's sort of a critical threshold. You have to have a sufficient number of people in any given population having that kind of immunity. And so that is what we call herd immunity.
Okay, my other follow-up is actually one from a selfish point of view because the man whose name was on our show for the longest time, Dave Nemo, he actually got COVID last week. We were at a party and my mom and dad got it as well. It's interesting because he got it really bad. My mom and dad didn't get it as bad, but they continue to get their booster shots as I do. Can you explain to our listeners, by the way, when it comes to certain shots, like for the recurring flu shot, the boosters for COVID, the idea that why some things, like, you get your polio vaccination, game, set, match, done. You're not going to get polio, or at least you put up the firewall you need to. But things like the flu and things like COVID, and I feel like I know the answer to this, but I feel like you know this answer a whole lot better than I do. Explain why some things you need to get recurring boosters for. And then I have a follow-up question about the booster in regards to the disease itself or the when you get sick.
Yeah, so this is a loaded question. I think there are several aspects to consider. One is that if we get a vaccine in childhood, basically our body learns something about a particular virus or bacteria. And just like we go to school and we learn things in school, but as we grow up and become older, we tend to forget certain things. So at some point in adulthood, we may need a reminder of useful things we have learned as children, but there is some remnant of memory of what we have learned as children. So the reminder can be sort of more subtle and will still be highly effective. And in a way, booster shots for certain vaccines serve a very similar purpose in that our immune system too can forget certain things. And then, booster shots are basically reminders to sort of reinvigorate that memory and, make sure that we continue to be protected. Now, of course, there are some things that we encounter in childhood that we never forget because they are maybe particularly, impressive or dramatic events that we experience. And that's also true for certain vaccines that are extremely powerful at generating immune memory that is so strong that we don't need reminders, that we have lifelong or almost lifelong protection. So that's one part of the answer, but there's a second part, and that is the vaccine. We make many different vaccines against many different bugs, and they're not all the same. All of these different pathogens, as if they infect our body, they make copies of themselves, millions of them, billions of them. And in the process, they sometimes make mistakes so that some of the copies look a little bit different from the parent virus. And so there is basically mutations that occur, and sometimes these mutations allow the pathogen to be more successful either at surviving in the host or after they get out of the host to survive in the environment or to infect somebody else. So there's an evolution that occurs where these kinds of pathogens over time look differently simply because as they acquire mutations, they become more successful. And so as they do that, they may not look exactly like the virus that we used to make the original vaccine, and then the vaccine or the immune response to that original vaccine will be weaker because parts of the virus are no longer recognized. So then we need booster shots where we tweak the vaccine such that the immune system is educated about the virus that is actually in circulation that is currently a threat to us. But these new viruses, typically, they still have sort of some, parts that are the same as the original virus. So even if you had a vaccine some time ago, some of the memory you have can still partially protect you against these new viruses. but the protection is incomplete. The longer ago your vaccination was, the less likely you are, though, to have effective protection, and the more likely you are to get an infection and to potentially have a more severe course of the infection.
So basically, what you're battling here, what the boosters are helping you battle, is a sleeper cell. The idea that the mutations allow it to disguise itself, the body can't recognize it, and then it takes hold again. And please correct me if I'm wrong. What the booster does is says, "Oh no, we know what you're up to," so we're actually informing the body how to recognize the changes that it has gone through to actually still gain a foothold. Is that fair?
That's fair in part. Only with a sleeper cell, your threat is already inside of you, and it just wakens up. Whereas in the case of most infections, they are not sort of sleeping inside of you. There are some that do that,
Right.
but most of them will come from the outside because we encounter, people in our environment who have an infection and then they spread it to us.
It changed.
But otherwise,
It,
the
cha-
analogy is quite.
it changed its costume. I use sleeper cell, and of course, I'm using it in more of kind of an espionage way, and I realize it's an actual term. So what we're talking about here is it's changed its costume. The way it's able to get into the system is that it's an unrecognizable entity. It's in a disguise. The mutation becomes its disguise that allows it to gain a foothold. I guess is a better way of framing it. Thank you for that correction. I've asked all of this because, of course, our dear friend Dave Nemo got himself a little bit of COVID, and he wanted me to ask you this question. So he's recovering from COVID now. He's learned his lesson, at least in the short term. He wants to get a booster shot to prevent it from happening again. How soon after recovering from something should you get the booster? Because after all, this is the other question I wanted to ask. Does Dave have an extended immunity for the time being because he's just gotten over it? And when should, after that, he get his booster?
Yeah, so the recommendation is typically to wait about 6 months, in part because once you have the infection and your body responds to it and you say you get better, now you have actually immunity, natural immunity that has occurred because you just had this infection. Your immune system has been stimulated by this virus, and now it has made some memory. Unfortunately, for certain infections, particularly, for example, for COVID, we know, and the reasons are not entirely clear, that the memory that we naturally develop to infections with, for example, SARS-CoV-2 is shorter lived than the memory that we develop when we take vaccines instead. So the memory wanes rather quickly, but you have to wait until it's sort of calmed down, because if you give the vaccine immediately after the infection, the pre-existing immunity will basically antagonize this vaccine, and you won't get the desired booster effect.
Okay, so the idea is that if you don't wait long enough, essentially what you're doing is you're setting off a battle in your body you don't need to have. All right, so and by the way, thank you for coming on. By the way, and just so thrilled to have you and walk into the fire. So I have a lot of friends out there, a lot of listeners who have real misgivings about getting immunizations. And often we will hear the term, "I need to do my own research," which often makes me cringe, doctor. But I'll tell you this. Is there a way, if somebody said to you, "Doctor, look, I believe you, you're a smart guy, you know what you're talking about," if you were going to point people to some place to go to say, okay, if you really want to get the facts straight, as opposed to just kind of looking all over the internet to find things that you want to believe, here's where you can go to find out what you need to understand. Where is the first place you would send somebody to get a better sense of all of this?
So I would point you to a web resource that my association, the American Association of Immunologists, had put out. It's called Immunology Explained. That's one word, immunologyexplained.org. And we have put out a lot of information on various aspects of what you need to know about the immune system, including about what you need to know about vaccines. And maybe in this context, I should mention that the AAI, the American Association of Immunologists, is one of the world's largest organizations of professional scientists who research the immune system. We are nonpartisan. We have members in all 50 states of the United States. We also have many international members. And our mission is to just explain to the public how the immune system works, what we know about it, how we can harness it to improve human health. And this information is all available in an easily digested, nonpartisan, scientifically founded way on immunologyexplained.org.
Dr. Uli, I also wanted to kind of follow up in regards to looking towards the future. Are there new, like I said, you guys are in a rapidly evolving science. Are there things that you are keeping your eye on in regards to the future of vaccines, the future of immunology that you're very excited about, and do you have any concerns?
Yeah, so I'm excited about many things in immunology because if you think about it, our immune system is everywhere and is involved in virtually every disease known to man. We know immunology plays an important role in neurodegenerative diseases that cause, for instance, Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. Immunology is important in cardiovascular diseases that result in heart attacks. It's involved in autoimmune diseases. It's involved in transplant rejection, and we have learned in recent years how to harness the immune system to fight cancer in a way that appears to be more effective in many settings than any conventional chemotherapy. We are learning very actively about how to make better use of our understanding of the immune system. There's a whole industry of biotechnology and pharmaceutical companies that is making use of our insights to develop new drugs to treat all of these different diseases. In the context of infectious diseases, you have always to be on the guard. There are pathogens that are in an arms race with us. As we get better, as our immune systems get better, as we develop new antibiotics, these bugs figure out ways to escape this. So we have to be always on the guard. We are never done. We have to always improve and innovate in order to stay ahead of that game.
By the way, and this is not so much directed towards immunology, but I just have been kind of keeping up, when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, AIDS was a terrifying factor. There are people, by the way, who have actually now found out because of the research and because of a lot of the work that's being done these days, they've forced the disease out into the open. Because of a lot of the work of a lot of really committed folks, there's a number of things that are on the verge of actually either being eradicated or being really kind of brought to heel as well. And the cancer stuff in particular is of a great fascination because if we can do that, we can prevent that from not just being treatable, but from never arising. I mean, am I understanding you correctly that we're talking about getting things to the point where we never have to deal with the aftermath of cancer because it never arises in the first place? Like I said, I want to make sure I'm hearing you right because it's very exciting.
Yes, you're absolutely right. This is one part of it. In fact, some of our vaccines prevent cancer because chronic infections with certain viruses can actually cause cancer, particularly human papilloma virus, which is sexually transmitted, is your most common cause of uterine cancer, cervical carcinoma, but it's also often involved in head and neck cancers. So by giving your children the HPV vaccine, you give them basically lifelong protection against cancers that they could get if they get infected with human papilloma virus. And similarly, hepatitis B virus can cause chronic hepatitis, an infection of the liver, which ultimately can result in liver carcinoma, very bad disease, often lethal. But by protecting against HPV, you can protect against the infection of the liver with hepatitis B virus. And in doing so, your risk of developing liver cancer is significantly reduced.
Let me tell you something, my friend. If that technology had actually existed, if the breakthroughs had actually happened a while ago, my grandmother would still be alive. It's hepatitis B that took her from us, and it was from a bad blood transfusion. And I got to tell you, the idea that something that killed her that there is now stuff that she could still be with us to this day. And I want people to remember that kind of stuff as they think about the importance of this. Dr. Uli von Andrian has joined us this morning. He's the president of the American Association of Immunologists. Guys, look, if you want to do your own research, I would suggest you start with immunologyexplained.org. You're welcome back anytime, Dr. Uli. It's been great having you on.
Well, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you, sir.